Hello, everybody. Hope you guys are all doing well. Welcome to our Robustel IoT Solutions webinar. Attendees are starting to join us. Wanted to let you guys know that my name is Benji Mellish. I'm with Streakwave, Marketing Director with Streakwave. This is our first webinar of the year, and we're excited to kick things off with David Evans and Joshua Farlow. I wanted to just let you all know that this webinar is being recorded. So if you have to jump off at any time, it will be sent out and you guys can finish watching it at a later time. Additionally, questions, we're going to do a Q&A session at the very end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them and we'll get to them at the very end. Anyway, we're excited to get started. Joshua, our VP of Sales, is gonna has a little bit. Joshua, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Benji. Good morning, everybody. Obviously, we're going to wait a few minutes for allow other people to join that might be having some technical difficulties with the wonderful world of Zoom. But we're excited about this. Streakwave continues to expand its LTE IoT product portfolio, and we're excited to see what Robustel has to offer. We've had the product on the shelf here for a little over a month and a half, and we're seeing some initial interest as they hit the US market, and we're really excited to have David Evans joining us and talk about the products and what makes them a little bit different from the other products out there in the marketplace. So appreciate it, Benji, and thanks for everybody for joining. Looking forward to the webinar. Take it away,
David. We have attendees here to let you take care of all the Robustel information you're going to share with us today. Take it away, David.
Thanks, Benji. Josh, much appreciated. Good morning, everyone, or good evening from here in the UK. My name's David Evans. I'm the Global IoT Solution Architect for Robustel. And these guys have kindly let me share some of the, hopefully, the more valuable, exciting and interesting highlights about Robustel as a business. I've been working in this area of, I guess, telecom, cellular technology for the best part of 20 years now. And certainly in the last 4 or 5 years, I've had a lot of fun because the team at Robustel are very, very open-minded, and so the scope to develop new products, new ideas, innovate quickly, as opposed to a protracted process has been available, and that certainly makes your day job a lot more exciting and a lot more fun. So to give you a bit of background on Robustel as a business, it was founded in 2010. I actually met one of the co-founders just a year before that, and we hit it off very well in slightly different roles, and I've kind of charted the progress since and joined the business 5 years ago. The HQ is down in Southeast China, close to Hong Kong. There's about 300 employees, so it's actually it's at a sweet spot. It's not too small, but it's not too big to still be agile and create OEM custom options and various ideas that can be employed quickly. 250,000 boxes a year fundamentally is the modus operandi. That is the revenue stream, although we're seeing a lot more maybe not directly revenue, but certainly the value prop is shifting very, very heavily to software as part of the overall conversation. Core products are, it's actually quite a narrow range. It is cellular routers, but it's amazing how if you provide routers but with a value-added approach, it's a massive Pandora's box that opens out once you start to talk about resilience and cybersecurity and network architecture and VPN. So, you know, there's plenty of scope to innovate. So low-cost 4G routers, more industrial 4G and 5G routers, and the operating system that resides on the routers, and now a very, very impressive monitoring and control platform for those. And I'll show you more of that in a minute. This is just a quick introduction. The factory, which was built in 2018, I visited a few times myself, and let's just say if ever we work together on a with an OEM project, OEM customer, then an offer I can make to all of you is that if ever we wanted to impress them, I walk around the smart factory. Unfortunately, this slide doesn't do it justice, but I walk around a brand new factory with a giant LED screen that you see down the bottom there is the size of a large room that shows all of the digital twin of the actual manufacturing process. A really compelling experience. And also, obviously, it means the actual manufacture is very fast, quick turnaround on low production runs, and and as cost effective as it can be. So that is I guess that's a big part of the narrative, the value prop. It is very much a product being manufactured from scratch. 40% of the workforce are R&D people of some description, hardware and software. So this is a slightly more friendly view of the actual products that we're talking about today. So at the back you'll see Robustel OS. That is the proprietary Linux operating system. Has been around for about 8 years now, and has just grown every single day, either with new features or with custom projects. Robustel OS Pro is a new addition. It's a Debian based operating system. In fact, it's a really smart innovation that is kind of a dual OS. This particular product line is a dual OS, so you kind of have the best things of Robustel OS and the best things about Debian, and we'll spend a small amount of time on that later on. And then on the right hand side at the back you'll see the Robustel Cloud Management Service. Again, we'll give a little bit of detail on there, but fundamentally these boxes move data from the edge to the cloud, and the cloud platform is the visualization of all those connections. And I think the key thing we've realized is that at low volume it's not really an issue, but at high volume, when you have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of devices, network management capability becomes absolutely critical. So this isn't an over product pitch. We're not going to sit there and talk through all of the products one at a time, but I wanted to give you a flavor for to make it as tangible as possible and give you a flavor of what we're actually talking about here. So I've cherry picked 3 products that are all available in the North American market with FCC, PTCRB, and various carrier certifications. That is an obligation on us, obviously, to be in the US. So the R1511 is a very low cost dual Ethernet and RS232 or RS485 device. It's got Wi-Fi as well, and it's just a very compact, cost-effective unit that we regularly sell into high volume deals where the capex on hundreds or thousands of devices is significant. So this is our price tool that unlocks the high volume deals that just can't sustain the high value routers. The R1520 has been phenomenal for us here in the UK in the last year. It's actually, although it's not the lowest cost product, it's our best selling product in the last year, because fundamentally you get a lot of bang for your buck. So 5 Ethernet ports, PoE, lots of I/O, serial and digital, and extra software inside, smart roaming, edge to cloud. These are things that I will expand on a little bit more later. But that really, in almost 25 years of working in sales and marketing, when it comes to products hitting a sweet spot or having a killer product, this really, I think it's very fair to say that the R1520 has occupied that space. And one of the more traditional products that is, you know, we have in utilities here. So a big part of the UK's gas distribution network. We have one of these on every gas pressure reduction site. And so this is just heavy duty, high EMC, high voltage, surge immunity, that kind of product. Which again, obviously has all the certs for the US market. And mentioning certifications, this can be, if you work with people that export outside the US, then instantly this can become a very big part of the overall conversation, the value prop and the narrative around where the money and the complexity actually is. I've got a little bit more on this later, so I won't go into fine detail now, but if you need to put a product, you need ICASA for South Africa, you need RCM for Australia, because you are working with a big OEM or exporter of products, a global exporter, then that is very much a strength of Robustel. So here's the kind of the mandatory marketing slide that shows the names that we all recognize. So although Robustel as a brand name is still relatively fledgling, there's been some amazing project wins that have taken place. A lot of them in close partnership with the big mobile operators. That's probably part of the reason why you know, some of this stuff isn't so well published, because some of them are quite heavily NDA'd by their nature. So, but there's been some very exciting stuff in these sort of markets: lift operation, retail, and industrial automation. And talking of that, we've gone from the sort of polished marketing slide. I like, as a techie, I'm more interested in the real bits and bytes and showing what we're actually doing in the real world. So the next few slides are fairly candid, unpolished view of our products in action. And so at one end of the spectrum, we have a flow metering project. I can't remember if it's water or it's some type of fluid going through the ground. It's necessary to monitor the network. And this is an R1511, very simply doing its basic job of reporting back that telemetry information from the field to a central SCADA platform where all of these inputs can be consolidated. So a very earthy industrial example. Here we have a in-vehicle project. So in-vehicle is a big part of what we do. So there's 1,000 buses over in Colombia driving around. They obviously, a 4G router gives them a connection to the internet for data debrief. But I included this one because there's a nice little feature of this particular product. It has a voice interface, an RJ11 port. And so by putting an amplifier and speaker onto that, you could talk to the driver over the air and broadcast messages and things like that. This is one from the UK, the Internet of Cakes, as I like to call it. This company have a brilliant business, a brilliant idea, and it's worked very well commercially at scale by having hundreds of supermarkets involved. They allow you to make custom cakes with your own design as part of, you know, one of the things you can buy from some of the supermarkets in the UK. And as is a common issue that we all face, if a third-party contractor puts equipment into a retail environment, it's very often the case they will not let you share their internet connection for security or other reasons. So we regularly find ourselves supplying our products to people that make these sort of kiosks, concessions, coffee machines, devices that go into someone else's premises who really need an independent route to the internet. So this is just quite a fun little example. And a project more relevant to our friends in the US, we worked with Checkpoint over a year or two to deploy in exactly the same premise here, retail outlets across all of the US. We used a Robustel router, but also multi-network SIMs. So a SIM that could use the AT&T and the T-Mobile network to make sure we got up to network availability that was needed to make sure these stores were all connected. And that's been in the ground 2, 3, 4 years now. We did a little bit of maintenance recently, and it's very nice to see, the uptime on routers of 900 or 1,000 days to really, prove the fundamental point of stability and reliability of the operating system, which is a big part of Robustel's pitch. So I'd like to just briefly share with you a commercial view. Now, this isn't just a shameless self-promotional exercise of me, David Evans. DE joins in 2018. The purpose of this slide, and these are real figures, it has been near exponential growth, well into the millions now. And the reason I did this slide originally and annotated it with the products is because for the last few years, Robustel has been making the right choices in terms of product. So what I showed you, the 5G box that I'm just about to share with you, and especially the management platform, every one of them has been executed well, and every one of them are now significant revenue generators. And all of my, so my remit in the UK, all of my distributors have doubled in the last year, doubled their revenue with Robustel. There or thereabouts, it's been 100% growth. So the specific, that was an extended introduction. Conscious that's already taken a little time, so I'll move through this pretty quickly. We do have a Q&A at the end, and of course we can always follow up afterwards, and Josh and Benji can help you guys with any follow-up. The goal here is to give you a flavor of what is new, differentiated, sexy, if there is such a thing in the world of networking. Not a me too product pitch. So you might see a bit of products, a bit of software, a bit of conceptual stuff, but this is just really trying to cherry pick something that is useful to you guys and is a little different from the mainstream. So having said that, this first little introduction on the R5020 router, which, as you can see per the stop press, FCC and IC Industry Canada has just been obtained in December. So the mandatory requirements for the US are now covered. Robustel are actually very early to market with a, should we say, light industrial stroke light industrial 5G router. If I'm honest, I was a little bit of a cynic that early to the party, but my opinions absolutely changed, because the average selling price of these units is relatively quite high compared with 3G, 4G type products. So, as a commercial person, it means actually you don't need to sell many 5G boxes into the market to really make a difference. And we've had some great wins. And what we see is future proofing has become relevant in the market. So if you only do a refresh every 5 years, then people are seriously considering 5G now. And also in this type of product, if you don't have 5G but it falls back to 4G, The 4G is category 16. So anecdotally, I have someone here in the UK, they can only get 4G, but that 4G downlink is 100 megabits per second. So yeah, we're seeing real traction now. And I've personally moved from a little bit of a cynic to, yeah, this really has a place. One of the examples, actually, when you can see down the bottom there, I've put 200 pieces for famous UK furniture retailer. They literally sat there and said, do I go 4G or 5G? And because of the refresh cycles and other decisions, they went with 5G. Another thing I'll quickly sort of cherry pick there is towards the latter end of 2022, there was also a very, very enjoyable win for Robustel in the Middle East. It's heavily under wraps, unfortunately, so heavily NDA, but that was a 2,500 piece 5G router win for a security company. And one of the things that's helped with is, you know, that's a significant order for a 5G router. So that, along with all of the other bread and butter business, has helped to obviously increase the volume, which improves the yield, which gets the component cost down and puts us in a very, very good position with suppliers. So yeah, this is, I can't say there's a vast amount technically to discuss here, but commercially, it's now very relevant in terms of its contribution. And I think it's key to point out is the ASP, the average selling price of a 5G box currently is two to three times what the 4G products we've got used to are. And so it becomes a lot, you have to sell a lot less boxes to make an impact. If that's the way you're targeted, or that's one of your objectives. So whilst the 5G NSA networks are still fairly fledgling, where does the business case make sense? And it's not so much the industrial space, but more the enterprise space, or enterprise/industrial crossover. So in the vehicle market, for applications like passenger Wi-Fi, it's a no-brainer. In fact, for any application, if you've got a relatively expensive vehicle, the small delta on cost between 4G and 5G, and the fact that it costs money to put it in, it's a no-brainer to put in a 5G unit, simply to get the fattest pipe to the internet that is possibly available. And many things like commercial buses will be in cities. Cities are the first beneficiaries of fast 5G connections. So along with some of the captive portal stuff that we do, we're seeing quite a lot of traction in passenger Wi-Fi for this solution. And the other, fixed wireless access, many companies obviously have a primary broadband, especially in smaller offices, and they want to back up. And now the expectation can easily be hundreds of megabits from such a box. And certainly here in the UK, we're seeing the availability of unlimited tariffs is a big driver for this type of setup as well. When the data costs were very, very high to achieve this, or there was risk, that market wasn't as big. But now the airtime is very affordable. That's what is helping the growth of this type of broadband backup situation. So I'm going to have to speed up a little here, guys. So I put some little bookends on each section because we are kind of moving around topics, but the idea is to try and keep it lively throughout how there's lots of different concepts within this world. And actually what these are also is value propositions. If we're looking to engage customers on this, then these are all little nuggets that differentiate and can be used in a conversation with customers. So a big thing that happens in Europe to increase reliability of 4G connections is the application of what's typically known as roaming SIMs, but probably multi-network is a more accurate name for how we use them. So the simple example we give here, if you used a Vodafone SIM, you get 2G, 3G, and 4G. And so you get 3 ways of moving your data from the edge to the cloud. If you use a multi-network SIM, you get the same on 4 networks. There's a small caveat about the 2G on the 3 network, but fundamentally you get 11 methods or 11 radio access networks that can transmit your data from the edge to the cloud. And what we have here is one of the biggest objections to using cellular communications is reliability. And there are many things you can do to improve reliability, certainly from an RF point of view. And one of them is to change the SIM to one that can connect to many networks rather than just one. And that's exactly what we did in the Checkpoint retail project example I showed you earlier. We used AT&T and T-Mobile, and you could see at some sites it was it's interesting the way that the split was almost 60-40, quite close to an even split across the states. So the reason for this little introduction to roaming technology is the SIM is actually only half the story. Now, depending on where you are with this may or may not be relevant, but if ever you get an objection about the reliability of 4G, you would really like the flexibility, the ease of installation, the fact that you could even put it on a vehicle or it can, it can go anywhere. But there is any pushback about reliability, then we say, first concept is you take a multi-network SIM. The second concept is you have to take some software that actually gets the best from that SIM. It's quite a long topic. Fundamentally, the network selection process is out of date and not fit for purpose. And that's kind of why I've shared this slide with you, because there will be a subsection, I think, of the audience that actually this really resonates with. And hey, if we can offer higher reliability 4G, then we've got quite a story to tell. So please feel free to download that white paper that will frame the problem and it frames the solution. And the fundamental message we need to get across here, if reliability could be quite critical for your application, is fundamentally smart roaming, which is a piece of software developed by Robustel, sits in the operating system, as you can see there. The initial premise was high reliability, which we know is desirable to everyone. We know yes is going to be the answer. As it's evolved from V1 to V2, what we've also seen is when you have this kind of setup, something that would be valuable is to be able to look at every network that you can connect to and measure its performance with a speed test, which is ultimately all people really care about. And not only can you measure it with a speed test, you can say, hey, I'm gonna go to AT&T at this site instead of T-Mobile or Verizon because it's performing the best. So steering of roaming, it's a big topic. But if you feel there's a value prop in there for you somewhere, then it's a very big specialism of mine and of Robustel's. And we've productized it in this smart roaming offering. And as always, bringing everything back to the dollars, which is what we're ultimately here for. We won a very nice utility project in the UK, 3,000 sites with the R1520. And I just had to share this soundbite. It's very nice. The project manager, one of the reasons we chose the R15 1520 instead of the competitor, It's because of smart roaming. So that's a $500,000 deal, because we painted a picture of a higher reliability connections than was being painted by a competitor. So if you were struggling to understand perhaps what I was talking about there, then from a techie perspective, here's a simple sales narrative. So all of the different types of 4G or 5G router that are put out in the field to connect a whole myriad of devices. It could be PLCs, media players playing adverts in digital signage. The sky's the limit. Fountains, fountains in stately homes. Absolutely anything could be connected to these devices. But as you start to roll them out, you start to become a network operator. And that means you need some visibility on how it all works. So this is Robustel's Microsoft Azure based router management platform. And from a commercial perspective, there's a very, very important narrative here. That there is one important point, one important takeaway above all else. The basic view that you see here, so the signal strength, the data usage, the online offline status, detailed modem statistics, the mapping, that basic version is completely free of charge. And that is the most, commercially, is the most important message, because what it's doing is encouraging adoption. Even we've seen with our competitors, even at low volume, at a low charge, people will say, well, I don't really have a cost center to attribute that to. I'm not going to bother with that. If it's free, then people do invest the time to use the platform, and then they start to use some of the more advanced features. And so that's kind of the upside, that's the upsell. Conversely, what we're seeing, like in the big utility projects I told you about, this type of management interface is now becoming mandatory. So, the counter argument is you can't not have it anyway. And then it becomes a question of, what are the features under the bonnet? How many value adds are in there, to determine the value prop. Certainly on the basic version that costs nothing, the value prop's pretty strong. Even I can sell it. And I thought I'd give you, just to extend that point, I thought I'd share with you a typical view. Now, it's important to say that if everything is working fine, you probably won't, or your customers, the system integrators and the OEMs probably won't be spending any time on this. But when it's not, you can be alerted to issues, you can drill down on them, you can look at historical data, and you can try and fault find things. And also you can proactively update things like firmware, applications, configuration. You can switch Wi-Fi on and off, perhaps, if you, we had a COVID project here where that was relevant. There's a whole load of stuff you can do that fundamentally is trying to avoid a site visit. And the site visits are relatively, compared with the actual cost of the technology now, are very expensive. A truck roll is expensive compared with the tools now to facilitate doing quite a lot of the work remotely. So again, really happy to do a deep dive on the cloud platform and some of the fine detail. We can control the digital I/O. We can talk to serial ports. We can run a Wireshark capture over the air. There's some, in the right hands, there's some amazing stuff we can do. Obviously, this is just a quick snapshot of some of the key things today. So unfortunately, we can't go into too much more detail. But with the Streakwave team, we're obviously we can provide that, fill in the details. Something that is a feature of RCMS, of the router management platform, that I did just want to cherry pick on was a really nice integrated VPN capability. So irrespective of how the router connects to the internet, which SIM card you use, and where it is on the surface of the earth, we can in a very lightweight fashion, allocate an IP address to it. It's all clever use of open VPN technology. Allocate an IP address to it, and then you can click on that IP address. You can log in to the router directly. So if you need to change some settings, you can administer the router remotely. But more importantly, and excuse the scruffy office that I have here, but more importantly, this is a router that is connected on the LAN, a camera that is connected on the LAN side of a router. And this is to illustrate that from Robust VPN, you can connect not only to routers anywhere, but you can make an inbound connection to devices, Ethernet and serial devices like cameras, like PLCs, like controllers, anything. And so this extension to RCMS, the VPN piece, especially with a basic package at zero cost, and this at a relatively, for a month's license for this is relatively very, very cheap, and you're not committed for any contract period. You can just use the VPN and then switch it off after a month. The use case for people tasked with maintaining remote assets is very compelling. So here's one for the guys that might have some MVNO involvement or know a little bit more detail on this. If you are familiar with fixed IP SIM cards, we can give sort of pros and cons of Robust VPN against how you would use a fixed IP SIM card to achieve the same ends. Really don't have time now, but hopefully that just frames of the type of thing that it offers if you are familiar with that technology. And I had to drop this in. We have one particular customer. We have multiple customers using this, but one particular customer is using it brilliantly. You can create almost like a virtual network that is purely over 4G. It doesn't ever hit a server. So across large campuses, if you have a camera on the entrance to a car park at one end, but the ALPR database, so the license plate database is at the other, you can just put a router in front of each and create like a virtual Ethernet cable. So that's, again, it's a bit of the thinking outside the box, bit of innovation. What else, what's a bit differentiated? What else can we do? And this is the sort of stuff we love, the problems we love to solve. So something I'll quickly touch on. Now, a quick caveat on this is that the certifications aren't completely finished yet, but certainly we are viewing this as a very, very exciting prospect in the kind of light industrial space. And the best way to frame what the actual proposition is here is we see many people now, products manufacturers, that need a computer, typically a Linux computer, in their system somewhere. They're using some of the new generation, very ultra low cost PCs, like a Raspberry Pi or Arduino or some other very low cost single board computer. They then connect that to a router for their internet connection, and that gives them a connected product at a pretty low cost, a low bill of material cost. So we thought, let's put all of that into a single box and solve some of the problems like availability, certification, simplicity of the solution, the repeatability, the integrated cloud platform, the ability to reach it with a VPN. Let's make it a one box solution, and let's make that price as close as possible to the 2-box solution, which ultimately, has been done to get the cost of these industrial products down. Let's put that proposition together. And I'm personally surprised by how applicable it is. And I think the key to it is because it's an ARM CPU on these kind of Raspberry Pi products, and because we've used the same instruction set on the computer in the EG5100 series, you can take the existing software, which could have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop, you can lift it up and you can put it on this box. So we can do a proof of concept without even shipping hardware. We do a proof of concept over the air. They just log onto the command line of the EG5100 and they can qualify that the software installs and runs. And so we can do a very deep proof of concept over the air, or online, should I say. And this would be a typical example. It's where you need a little bit of edge processing. So, this is a fairly generic example. You capture an image, you process the image locally, you run your AI algorithm at the edge. You find out if there is, for example, a pothole in the road. And it's only then do you start engaging the cellular networks to send the exceptions. You don't send all the data, you send the exceptions. And that's the luxury that edge processing gives you. And then obviously, whether it's Google, Amazon, or Microsoft's cloud platforms, it doesn't really matter, but that is kind of the concept behind where we're going with this. And we're really seeing traction in this sort of thing. Medical mammography units is another big project we've got where you need that little bit of compute at the edge in a small footprint box. And again, those of you that are familiar with software, you'll know that what Docker means in the context of this sort of project is that if the guys that have already written this software have containerized it into something like Docker, then literally you can pick it up and put it on the Robustel EG5100 product, potentially with absolutely zero development effort. And when you get under the skin of these big projects, this software NRE is a big part of the decision-making process. So, last but by no means least, I think we can claim the world's first truly global 4G router. And I think there's quite a bit of mis-selling in this space, because you could make the global claim on different premises, but fundamentally the important considerations are frequencies and certifications. And the root issue is that there has been, compared with 2G and 3G, 4G now requires lots of different frequencies across different continents. But that problem was solved by the module vendors 2-3 years ago when they offered a low-cost global solution. There used to be a very high-cost global solutions that didn't fit in Robustel's portfolio because we're at the lower cost end of the market. But when that became available, the frequency challenges were solved. But what I'm And you know, I remain to be corrected. We don't know everything about everyone's products, but the real challenge was certification. And so what has taken place over the last 2 years is that a significant cost, six-figure cost, and actually significant risk as well, because if you get a certification on a certain design, the design goes end of life because you can't get the components, especially in recent times, then basically your money's lost. So it's probably the reason why there isn't a huge amount of, if any, competitors in this space. And to give you some context to that, to get certification for Russia, you need EAC. For China, you need CCC, Anatel for Brazil, RCM for Australia, ICASA for South Africa. And as this slide illustrates, I'm not going to go through the detail, but I want to kind of show you what sits underneath this, is every single one of those certifications is a complicated, bureaucratic and expensive project. And I think one of the key things here is this topic for exporters and global product manufacturers suddenly becomes very relevant when you move outside your home continent. Typically, you have routers that do the job locally. When you go overseas, suddenly it starts getting tricky. And a really nice anecdote for this is we work with a major wind turbine monitoring company. And as their goods were arriving in South Korea, they were held and said, well, it's got a telecoms component. We need the KCC certification for South Korea. The paperwork was made available to the partner passed it to the customs agency. Everything was fine, and it moved on into the country. So there's some of the really rather dull and arduous real world logistics of, you know, export import. I'm no expert, but I've just seen some anecdotal examples. And yeah, so in some ways, I'd almost advocate this becomes like the de facto product. It's got FCC and IC for Canada, PTCRB, AT&T, Verizon's just being finished off. So in many ways, this with an attractive price that it has, considering the amount of technology in there, this could be the go-to box for all IoT projects. And again, I just want to make you aware, there's a lot of information on the website, but the two white papers that I've pointed you to here, I think are particularly good. So if you think there is a value prop for you here, if that could be useful, then please, by all means, do feel free to take a copy of this from robustel.com. So final, literally final slide now, or final two slides on a single topic, which is cybersecurity. And I think there's increasing nervousness about products of this type and what's in them and where they come from. And it's certainly something, a conversation when, like, for example, when I'm selling into a large water utility in the UK, it's considered national critical infrastructure, and lots of questions are asked. A tool that we have that we can share with you, generally it's shared under NDA, but you know, we can talk about it on if we have significant projects that we want to work together as a team, is a piece of work that was instructed to be done by Netitude in the UK. They're a penetration testing house that basically takes an operating system like ours and gets two experts, real Linux boffins, gives them 5 days to tear it apart and try every conceivable attack on that operating system. And one of the great things that is now in our armory is, as of the end of 2022, this were the findings of an independent penetration test company. So in the cybersecurity conversation, obviously we can offer this rubber stamp, this document, but we also learned a hell of a lot during the process. So we can have a very good conversation around that subject matter as well. So just to say before I hand back to Benji, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you joining. We will have a Q&A session now. It's a lot of disparate topics, but hopefully the goal was to show you that there's a lot of differentiated or interesting options when it comes to trying to crack the market. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, David. So we have several questions. Excited to hear what you have to say. There's I'll go in order from the very beginning. One earlier into the presentation when you were talking about the devices is, can you sideload Debian packages on these devices? You were talking about Linux, and so that was one of the questions. I'm going to let you take some time to answer that.
Yes.
Simple answer is yes.
Yeah, because I'm sure James knows that there is nothing that's just yes about Linux. But yeah, so actually, James, we kind of coined it as a dual OS, not dual boot, but a dual OS device. And what we do is, where there's any shared resources, we relinquish control to you. And yeah, there's a relatively large amount of flash and RAM, and it is designed for you to install your software on there. So that box stops being a generic box, and it becomes a medical imaging device controller and communications hub. So yes.
Good. Well, I'll go on to another one. Kevin, how do these industrial routers perform in rural areas where internet connectivity is limited to a single fiber cable provider?
I'll take the rural piece. Obviously, that generally correlates with scant coverage and less cells. The technology is obviously entirely dependent on the availability of network resources. In the entry-level 4G products, it's Cat4 LTE. The 5G box that I showed you is Cat16 LTE. So depending on what we're trying to get, which is high throughput, maybe for a home user, or absolute resilience, we would probably have different answers to that. If it's absolute resilience, what I alluded to, what we do here and it's quite strong in Europe, I'm not sure it's as well adopted in the States, but maybe we're uncovering an opportunity, is this concept of multi-network SIMs. So, we can have AT&T, T-Mo and Verizon all on one SIM. So that gives you a better chance of getting a connection. Now, if you want a better chance of getting a fast connection, then, we might look at different solutions, outdoor antennas and things of that nature, something to get some of the carrier aggregation that might be on offer from the networks. So certainly they use industry standard technology. And it's then about, what else can we optimize in software? So
okay,
certainly as strong as any.
Yeah, Kevin, I hope that answers the question. It is I think that one's a tough one to fully say this I mean, it's a complicated one because rural areas, there's always limited access, and I hope that whatever service provider you choose, there's the capability of choosing multiple service providers with Robustel. Is that correct, David?
Yeah, it's one of the things we specialize in. If you choose the appropriate SIM card, managing a SIM with multiple network options, especially for things like utilities or, you know, where it's a smaller amount of data, but it's absolutely critical that telemetry data gets there. For high bandwidth stuff, you know, if satellite maybe the other consideration, then, you know, maybe putting investing in the external solution, the antenna solution, a directional antenna. These are the sort of things you have to think about there, perhaps.
Thank you, David. Well, I'm going to move on to another question. So we were talking about the combination of Raspberry Pi and the 4G router all into one box. And Dustin asked, is this actually a Raspberry Pi in the 5100, or is it a different SBC? They're currently using Balena for their fleet management, and only certain SBCs work with them. So I don't know if you see that question, David, but maybe you can answer it a little bit.
I've got to say, so far, I'm wonderfully impressed with the quality of the questions. You'll have to thank your guys, Benji, because this is, yeah, these are superb. So thank you. It's not a Raspberry Pi, and that's what's exciting about it. It's a chip level design. So, you know, we're putting down the eMMC flash and the actual CPU itself. But the reference is kind of a marketing one to try and make it help people quickly think of what our proposition is. And because the CPU instruction set is identical, you know, technically it stacks up as well. I mean, one of the offers we could make, Dustin, if we think it's, you know, commercially worthwhile, is, you know, you can literally just try installing your software on a box. We can do it over the internet, give you command line access or help you with it. Increasingly, I'm seeing that the only real way to start these proof of concepts is to try it, because you don't know the CPU, the RAM, the flash requirements. So would be very happy to engage further if it helps.
Thank you, David. So we're running short on time. This is an hour-long webinar. I'm sure we can go here a little bit longer. Another question from Sanjay, just a quick question. Is there any satellite IoT integration?
No, is the answer to that. I'm going to go a little bit quicker here, Benji.
Okay.
Because these are great questions.
Yeah,
no,
it's a great question.
No is the answer to direct integration, although what we often do is we use Ethernet 0, wherever it is, as a WAN port. We connect that into a satellite modem. Satellite goes primary, and then our router can take care of the failover from that point of view. So no direct satellite technology, transceiver technology, but we do often use it as a complementary product to something like Starlink.
Yeah. Okay. James asked a question, what is the timeline for FCC approval in the US for the EG Linux-based product?
I'm going to come back to you on that, because I don't want to give you the wrong information.
Okay. Okay. And finally, we had this question, and it's kind of interesting. At what point does a user switch from the basic free RCMS to the paid version? Or when do you normally see people transition?
Well, the luxury we have is they don't have to, is the truth. You can use the basic version. You can go up to, say, the VPN version, make a remote connection, solve a problem remotely, and then just not auto-renew. So you don't have to make an out-and-out transition. It's almost a pay-as-you-go service, which is brilliant for customers. Not so brilliant for the team that are trying to generate revenue at HQ, but it's working well, so we're not going to change that.
Perfect. Well, David, I think our hour is coming to an end here. I want to thank everybody for joining us. There are a few other questions that I think, David, I'm going to shoot them out to you. And if you want to type them out, we'll probably direct those to the people who asked the question. But there are some, this is being recorded. So if anyone missed an opportunity to wants to go back, they can go back. I will get that all out. David, I really do appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody who joined us. There is so much to know and learn about Robustel, and I'm sure there are so many questions. Our team at Streakwave can also help answer them, and we'll engage with you. Feel free to contact anyone at Streakwave, and we can get you in touch with David as well. David, any last parting words that you want to share with everybody?
Just a massive thank you for joining. Really appreciate your time, and yeah, let's see what we can build together.
Perfect. And let's maybe think of a more technical demo or the webinar where we get into the technical engineering details if you're up for it. We'll keep you guys all informed on that. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Cheers all. Thank you.